Hello and welcome to Green Building Bites presented by Green Building Alliance. I'm Leslie Montgomery from the Green Building Alliance team, and in today's Bite, we bring you an interview with Pete Jefferson. Pete is the principal at BranchPattern, and he has over 20 years of experience in helping his clients deliver healthy and high-performance buildings through design, commissioning, and building performance monitoring. Using his background in mechanical engineering, Pete brings a whole systems perspective to his projects, identifying where climate, architecture, and systems must work harmoniously for the best outcomes. Pete does work all over the country, so today I want to ask him about his insights on coming trends in the green building industry and his tips for what he thinks stakeholders should be focusing on now. Hi, Pete, how are you?
I'm good. How are you doing, Leslie?
Good, it's really good to see you. Thank you for doing this interview today.
Sure, happy to.
All right, I appreciate it. Well, let's get started. You're, one of my favorite people to come to for the coming trends in the new year, and this is a different year than all the rest, but we still really, look for your advice in terms of what you think people should be paying attention to right now, and what those trends are that you're seeing through your work. So I know you do work all over the country, and I just love to know what are some trends that you've spotted in the green building industry that you think people should take note of?
Sure. Yeah, I'm always happy to talk about trends and kind of what we see coming down the pike and what we're maybe working on already a little bit. I think the first one might be obvious, but a little more nuanced in the way we're seeing it. And that's just basically health in buildings. Obviously, with the pandemic, everybody's talking about what essentially has proven out is that our existing buildings aren't all that safe for us. And so there's been no shortage of ideas on how to make buildings safer for COVID, but hopefully we're reaching a point where there's a light at the end of the tunnel. And so as we're starting new projects right now, we're starting to already look kind of beyond COVID. We're trying to really take what we've learned and apply that forward, but also to recognize that this has been the dominant thing in all our lives for about a year now. So even the general public has an increasing awareness about building health. Another one that we're seeing an uptick on is ESG reporting. And so for a lot of people, they probably have never heard of ESG reporting. I probably hadn't heard of ESG reporting somewhere between 5 and 10 years ago, but it's really environmental, social, and governance reporting. And so what we mostly focus on is the E in ESG. And just to put it in context, about 86% of companies on the S&P 500 do some form of ESG reporting. And a lot of these companies, especially after the US left the Paris Accord, decided to take it on themselves and really step up to the challenge. And so you've got a lot of companies out there that have made carbon neutrality statements, and those are goals that they have now. So they have to measure how they're doing now and how they get there. And so if you look at the greenhouse gas reporting, that's the primary feature of the E part of the ESG report. More and more companies are doing that. And the biggest part of their portfolios typically is their buildings and transportation.
Are there any other trends you think we should be paying attention to?
If you're not talking about embodied carbon in your projects now, you probably will be in the very near future. It's increasingly part of programs like Architecture 2030. New versions of LEED have credits or pilots for that too. And organizations themselves are actually setting embodied carbon goals as well too. So when we started really down this path of trying to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions related to buildings, we were mostly focused on operational carbon. And when we talked about 40% of CO2 emissions are due to buildings, and we needed to address that, what we kind of left out of that conversation for a couple decades was about 11% of that is just the materials that go into buildings. So we've made great strides in operational carbon. Now we need to step up to the plate and really start to tackle the embodied carbon too.
Okay, so in addition to the trends that you're noticing around the country, what are something specifically that you think people should be focused on as they pursue healthy and high performance building projects?
Yeah, I think there's something kind of fundamental that we could all do a better job on, and AIA does a really nice job capturing it. It's their framework for design excellence. So all of those projects that we submit once a year for design awards, AIA has actually adopted this framework that's got 10 principles in it, captures things like resource use, energy, and water, but it also includes things like equity and health. It's a really nice framework. I would encourage designers to take a harder look at that and start to incorporate those principles early in the project.
Okay, so we'd love to hear about any exciting high performance building projects you're working on right now.
Well, we've got a few. The one that comes to mind is actually a project with ZGF Architects, and we're actually doing two with them. We're working on the new Immune Transplant and Therapy Center at Pitt with them, which is a historic building renovation. But the one I'm really excited about, maybe even more so, is the Penn State Physics Building at State College. It's a pretty significant project. And it includes a pretty major renovation of the existing Osmond Laboratory, which is where the atom was first seen. So it's got historical significance. But it also includes a pretty major addition to the building. And aside from some ambitious energy goals, which are kind of baked into Penn State's high performance building guidelines already, it's an opportunity for us to kind of dig in deeper into this carbon issue. So we are looking at the existing Osmond lab, and it's this, again, this historic building. There was a lot of resource expenditure to construct that building. And we're doing some analysis on the embodied carbon of the existing building and the embodied carbon of a new building. And of course, if we can renovate more of the existing building and do so in a way that allows us to construct a smaller new building, that's avoided carbon that would go into the construction of it. So that is something that I think is really kind of interesting at a baseline standpoint, to look at old versus new. But then even in the new building, we're starting to dive deeper into some of these embodied carbon assessments too. So looking at the material choices in it, the FF&E type stuff that will go into it too, and trying to get a better handle on what we can study and quantify from an embodied carbon standpoint. And there's loads of new tools out there too to calculate the embodied carbon. So we're playing around and piloting some of those on it too. So that's the one that I think of as kind of my most interesting project right now, and definitely taking up a bunch of time, but I think it's going to be a really exceptional project.